Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think the witching hour is upon us of 7 o'clock, and I have very few duties today, but one of the duties is to make sure we can leave on time, so I will start on time. I'll do some introductions in just a moment, but before I do that, I've got to point out the fire exits, which is where you came in and on the other side, and then we would leave and meet in the car park. Can I introduce myself? First of all, my name's Andrew George. I'm the independent chair for today. I have a background as an academic, as a medical researcher and academic at Imperial College London and at Brunel University London. And I'm also I'm deeply involved in the healthcare system, particularly the NHS, on research ethics and on healthcare education in particular. One of my other duties I have as well is I'm a governor of this college, Richmond Hillcroft Adult Community College, and so I welcome you here with two hats on, one as chair of today's event, but also to Richmond Hillcroft Adult Community College. And just for those of you who don't know, I'm going to take the opportunity just to plug them very, very quickly. They really have missions to help people make the best out of their lives. That includes a large group of adults with learning difficulties, lots of people who are wanting opportunities to develop their job skills, whether that's foreign languages or skills that help small businesses operate, or accountancy and skills like that, or other activities which are called leisure and well-being activities. And indeed, at the moment I'm playing truant because I am meant to be at a class learning how to draw. So I'm going to have to go and make my apologies to the teacher afterwards. But if anyone's interested, we have a full list of programmes outside. Okay, that's the plug over. I just now want to quickly go through what we are trying to do today. This is an event that Richmond Council organise. It's to have a dialogue between the councillors and the local communities that they serve. It's really here to start conversations, to discuss local issues. So we're not discussing national issues, we're here to discuss local issues, issues that matter to the people who live in Richmond North and Richmond South. And we're going to try and do that today in a non-political manner, and do that in a way which is actually respectful of everybody's beliefs. I think the thing that I would really like to get out of today is that clearly there are going to be things where you want to hold the councillors to account. You will want to say to them issues that you have with the services or it. What I'd also like us to do, and towards the end, especially towards the end, there are going to be opportunities outside, is to also think proactively about what you do want. So that we think positively about how to make this community a community that works better for everybody. So I think good ideas for the future are welcome, as well as pointing out things that could be done better. So my role today is going to be to field the questions, to try and keep everybody under control, and as I've already importantly said, to keep people on time. So just before I start, I'll just go through what the plan for today is. What we're going to have is a presentation from the two wards, a short presentation from the two wards about the achievements over the past time and where they're at. And then we are going to have some written questions, so some pre-submitted questions. Hopefully the people in the audience can read them out, and I've got one that has been submitted in advance. And then we will open the questions up to the floor. That will take until about 8:45, and at 8:45 we're going to have an update on the ward budgets, which is a new approach, and again this is a chance for you to think proactively about what you want in your ward. Okay. So that's the plan for the day, and so before I get into the introductions, also a few rules. We are all microphoned, we are being filmed. If you ask a question, I hope you will ask a question, the leader of the council, Graham, will be, Gareth, I've written down wrong. Gareth will be running around and doing the hostess with the mostest, with a microphone. 2 rules about microphone. I used to do some stage work when I was young, and if you want to really annoy a technician, a sound technician, what you do is you take the microphone and you tap it. I know a sound technician who used to, if they do that, leap into the audience, grab the microphone and tap the person on the head with the microphone. You don't need to do that. It will be given to you turned on. Just hold it to your mouth a bit like a ice cream and speak clearly into it. Even if you have got a voice that could raise the dead from the other side, please do that, because we are being filmed, and that way the question will be caught. And these are listened to. These are not, so the event that happened last week in Hampton Wick, I'm told, has already had 500 people who have watched the download on it. So it is important that people can hear your questions. So I'm going to start off now by introducing the councillors who are present. First of all, I'm very pleased that geographically people got a good geographical orientation. That to the north of me is Richmond North. Nancy Baldwin and Richard Warren, who are the 2 councillors representing, and they'll have a chance to say something. And then to the south of me, we have South Richmond, Councillor Planner Fleming, and Councillor Peter Buckwell. We are actually really well positioned here, because we are actually in South Richmond ward here. If you went out of that door and went about 20 yards, you would then be in North Richmond. So I think we are perfectly positioned here, with me sort of almost on the boundary. So I'm going to start off by asking Nancy and Richard to give a brief introduction to their ward and to what they want to say.
Thank you, Chair. At last year's community conversation, residents asked us if we could expand recycling. And I'm very pleased to say that we have managed to do that. In fact, it's happened across both wards. An additional 500 flats that either had very limited recycling facilities or none at all are now having recycling. And that includes 236 flats, Cortlands, that are going to be taking part in the council's food recycling programme trial, and they'll start that next month. So that's across both wards. Looking specifically at North Richmond, on other matters, I'm very pleased to say that we've increased the number of neighbourhood watch coordinators by 7. That was after we delivered nearly 2,000 street letters to roads that didn't have a coordinator. And that's gone down very well at the police liaison group meeting, I can assure you. And it's also part of a general improvement, both in relations with the police, we work very closely with and dealing with issues, trying to deal with them as quickly as possible, and also improving communications between us and the public, and also between residents as well. So, for example, there had been a dispute between a local business and residents that had been going on for some years. We intervened, we organised a meeting, and we chaired the meeting between the different parties, and since then relations have improved quite significantly. In other areas, I'm also pleased to say that last winter we organised a petition with residents that got 400 signatures to asking TfL to restore a bus shelter, Sheendale Road bus shelter, that they'd taken away. And after that pressure, with the petition that was presented to City Hall, they did reinstate that bus shelter. So that's good news. And also, we're very pleased that we persuaded Richmond Council's Planning Committee to reject the Homebase site planning application, which the Mayor of London has now called in, but we did get it through the council. And I'd now like to pass over to Nancy, who has a couple of announcements.
Well, I think the main thing that we're most proud of is that we're building bridges between us, the residents and officers. So, for example, with getting the bus shelter reinstated, we were able to make a relationship with TFL and with the Deputy Mayor in charge of transport, who is now helping us with things like improved access to North Sheen Station. We have also been able to build a relationship with Southwest Trains, becoming a member of the Community Rail Partnership, which is also looking at ways to improve the station and improve the facilities and signage and just the general look and feel of everything around there. So that's something else we're doing. And also to shine a light on some of the play activities that our children have. I mean, nobody had really looked at Rally Road RHACC or the Tangier Green, as they call it, or as people know it, as the Wyndham Road Recreational Center, for reasons that are not entirely clear. Rally Road RHACC is the only way to get into it is in Wyndham Road, so we've got signage. That was one of our wins, is to finally get signage so people can find it. And now we are entering into a consultation that's being led by the Parks Department to look at upgrading equipment and making accessible equipment so that handicapped children and children who have additional needs will be able to use that recreation ground as well. Then further in the future, we'll be looking at the Tangier Green playground, which everyone knows is the Warren Avenue triangle. Again, why it's called Tangier Green, I'm not sure why, but we'll be looking at that and making improvements on that. But we were able to do that because we as councillors have spent a lot of time making relationships, not just with officers, but with outside organizations, whether it be TFL, Southwest Rail, Network Rail, or Swellen, which is the Southwest London Environment Network, and things like that. So I think for us, if I had to make one big shout out for our biggest achievement, is by improving communications with you and with improving that connection between you and the people who can actually do things for us in North Richmond. So that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Thank you, Nancy and Richard. Pamela and Peter.
Right, thank you very much. And good evening. I suppose the biggest issue for us in South Richmond has been the number of robberies, and particularly robberies of young people, teenagers by young people. And we, earlier this year, a resident set up a group called Mothers Against Muggings, but they also got up a petition, and that attracted 1,000 signatures within, I think it was 3 days, and we helped them with that petition. That petition was eventually debated in council, but not actually until July because of various difficulties with finding meetings for it. But prior to that, we had a police liaison group meeting at which we had, well, 130 people, because there were people standing outside trying to listen, which we had senior members of the police there, and this was actually to look at what we can do to try to tackle these robberies. And as a result, a working group's been set up, and we've had a lot of help from the council's community safety officer, and as a result we now get a fortnightly update. I'm glad to say that the robberies have reduced. We've been fortunate. One of the things that both Peter and I and Bill wrote to the borough commander back in June, after that police liaison group meeting, to ask for a dedicated town centre team for Richmond. We have a fabulous South Safer Neighbourhood team, but I'm afraid they've got a wide area to cover and they just can't be, and their duties, in fact, their rota, that means that they're not on duty in the evenings. And so we believe there needs to be a town centre team, and we're continuing to press for that, even though we've been told, and subsequently the leader of the council also has written, but you know, even though we're told we're low down on the list. But so that's been the main issue. Also looking at other areas where we've got a lot of big drug activity related problem in Richmond. Vineyard Passage, there is a question about that later on, so I'll answer it then. But we have been working on that, and also in the Alberts, but all around. So we're working really closely with the police on that. There are a couple of planning things that I think people will want to be aware of. You probably know the House of Fraser. There's a planning application in for that. Unfortunately, I think we'd all be pleased to see that retail is being kept there on the ground floor. There's also an application for at the Cambrian Centre. Both the Cambrian Centre and Dixon House will be staying, but for creating a community area, but also affordable housing, and that planning application is in at the moment as well. We work very closely with the Business Improvement District in Richmond, and in particular, you'll probably see all those flower baskets around that they've put up, and they got a silver award for that. And then finally, because I leave something for Peter, Town Centre, we've been working for several years now with officers, looking at town centre improvements, aesthetic town centre improvements, and also a low emission zone for George Street. And that work is continuing. In fact, and I think there's a meeting about it next week. Peter.
Yes, thank you, Pamela. Good evening. I'm Peter Buckwell. I'll just add a few things to that. The town centre review that's ongoing, and of which we're both part of the town centre sort of review team. Very much energised by Peter Willem, who's sitting in front of us here. We've been meeting regularly on looking at signage, as Pamela has said, but one of the aspects that is being pushed forward is the new proposed cycle parking facilities behind the station. The number of bikes that are left in the quadrant in front of the station there makes a bit of a mess of the place. They tend to get locked to railings. You look at the railings, they've got bikes all the way along. So South West Trains came up with the money together with Network Rail for a proper cycle parking facility in the car park behind the station, which I think will park about something like up to 150 bicycles, and hopefully will take most of the cycle clutter, if you like, from in front of the station, and allow us to have a look at those railings and replace them with possibly something that's a little bit more in line with Richmond, and makes the place look a bit tidier, and gives us a better gateway for visitors who are coming out of the station. So that's one big development which we're pleased about. £3 to £4 million, which has been put up by Network Rail. We were promised it within a year from April 2017. Pamela and I attended the meeting in the car park. Network Rail were there, and they were going to build this thing in a year. Well, here we are 3.5 years later. It's not yet built, but it is on the way, and it will be done. Another thing we did get finished was the redevelopment of the Wakefield Road bus station, which the pavement was widened there. The old makeshift shelters were taken away and a brand new shelter installed, so that people don't get wet when they're waiting for the bus in quite the same way as they used to. Or Lord True, our former leader, used to tell me quite regularly that he was wet again from waiting at Wakefield Road bus station. Well, that's now been done, and we now have a bus station which I think is more fit for purpose, and Transport for London are certainly happier with it. If I may just mention, for those of you who are from the eastern end of South Richmond, the Sheen Common Drive, Orchard Drive, Berwyn Road area, there is of course a certain amount of controversy going on at the moment about the plans or that have been put forward in terms of some ad hoc signage to try and help some of the residents in crowded roads with rat running. There's an ongoing consultation which is shortly coming to an end there, and we have been working with residents to ascertain what they really want us to represent them on, and we've attended meetings with the representatives from Sheen Common Drive, Orchard Rise, Berwyn, and that little bit of Christchurch in that end of the borough. But that is part of a wider East Sheen study that's being consulted on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Pamela. Thank you for those updates from the two wards. I'm now going to go to questions, written questions from the floor. We've had 5 submitted, one of which I will read out. The first 2 come from Katie Lang. Katie, you submitted. Is Katie here? Is Katie here? I was told she was. In that case, I will read out her questions if she's not here. Well, she submitted 3 questions, but 2 of them I think can be perhaps linked together. And so what she's said is, I would like to ask about police presence patrol around the Vineyard Passage graveyard area. I grew up in the area and returned here a couple of years ago, and there's a noticeable change in the area. I'm concerned about safely walking up a passage in the dark. The area is being used pretty flagrantly by drug dealers' users who congregate around the first bench and near the paved tomb section. If policing is not an option, could cameras or other monitoring be used to try and deter these behaviours? And perhaps I could link that with the second question, which is, the rise in professional beggars is also noticeable, and I wondered what the policy was around managing this. It can feel quite threatening being followed by some of the young men who congregate around the station, who approach you directly on foot. Despite the help of the hostels, they feel pretty desperate. Pamela, you referred to this in your one. Do you want to kick off?
Yes, I'll kick off about Vineyard Passage, because this is something that I've worked on with actually residents in the area, because there is a lot of concern about antisocial behaviour, and particularly homeless people and drug dealing, and it is actually quite intimidating, and particularly for some of the residents around there. We've also worked with the Environment Trust, have a group that does work on clearing up there once a month. So we've also been working with them, and they've done a lot of work clearing some of the foliage and the trees, so that there isn't quite so much cover. But also the police and our parks patrol, because it does actually come under the responsibility of our parks. So both have been patrolling there very, very regularly. As a result, a lot of the drug dealing it's limited now. It has gone, but the trouble is, of course, you move it from one place and it turns up somewhere else. And as they say, they've moved it from South Richmond and it turns up in North Richmond. So, this is a huge problem. We've also been, the police and work at the council, and we've worked with Spear for the people who are very genuinely homeless, and to try to help them. And Spear, I must say, do a fantastic job getting people onto the Spear pathway and into accommodation, and also helping them with jobs. It is a lot better than it was. But in addition, there's going to be some new lighting put in there, replacing the sodium lighting with LED, and putting in 2 additional lights there, which I think will help. It's quite a difficult area because of the housing there, because you don't want the light shining into people's bedrooms. But I'm hoping that what is planned is going to make that less intimidating for people walking up and down. But it is a problem. It needs constant vigilance, and it is one of the areas that has been highlighted at the police liaison group, the last police liaison group we spoke about it, and also there are 2 or 3 residents who keep us in regular touch, and of course the neighbourhood watch, because we do have the most fantastic neighbourhood watch network in South Richmond, led by Bunny Farnell Watson, who I know is cycling somewhere abroad at the moment. So it is very much something that we're tackling, and the drug dealing generally. The Parks Patrol have been out around the Alberts, and the police are doing everything they can, but it is a problem all around the area, I'm afraid. Peter, do you want to talk about the begging?
Yes, please, Pamela. Yes, just a little bit about the professional beggars. They're not all professional beggars, of course. There are genuine ones there, but there are groups of professional beggars that come in. We have a regular police presence in Richmond 3 days a week, and the groups know when they're not there, and that's when they come in. And they come in by van load, and they're distributed around the place and then picked up at the end of the day. So it's the professional beggars that we would like to have a go at. And I know that they're professional because my wife and I were out in Bethnal Green about a year ago on one day, and we came across this chap, one leg, crutches, etc., and begging. And my wife felt sorry for him, as she does, because she's a lovely soul, and she bought him a sandwich and whatnot. And blow me, about 3 weeks later, he turns up in Richmond doing the same thing, So you see glimpses of the network, and it does come down, I think, to a regular police presence in Richmond. And I know we go on about it. Both Pamela and I have made speeches in council on this. We wrote to Sally Benatar on it. Our leader, Gareth Roberts, following a debate in the council chamber, wrote to her again saying that we must have an increased regular police presence in Richmond. And that, to my mind, is, in addition to our Safer Neighbourhood team, a town centre team. It's all, the evidence is all there on the Richmond Safer Neighbourhood Team website. You look at the statistics they give you. For a start, we have our crime rate is twice in Richmond, South Richmond ward is twice that of the rest of the whole borough. We have, I think, 11 crimes per 1,000 population, as opposed to 5. We're higher than the London average, which is 8. And then if you look at a map where it shows where the hotspots are, the crime hotspots, they are the big one, the dark red is the Green, Richmond Town Centre, and the Riverside, as you would expect, because it has always been like that. We attract people in because of where we are. It's a place people come to enjoy themselves, and that attracts low-level crime like professional begging. Unfortunately, it attracts more violent crime as well, such as the muggings. And unless you deal with the low-level crime, it attracts the more serious crime quite quickly. So we continue to ask for our town centre team, and you will hear us asking about it again and again. We continue to be told, no, you're not getting them, but we don't stop at that. We will continue to ask. Sometimes in this position, you've got tenacity is what wins through at the end of the day, and I feel that Richmond is very special. It should have a daily police presence. We're still looking for a base for them in Richmond after they lost the police station, and we will continue on to fight for that until we've got a daily police presence in our ward.
Thank you, Peter. So, North Richmond.
Well, I want to go on with that because whilst you kind of, I don't want to say flippantly because you're not a flippant man, but saying how it got pushed into North Richmond, it has to a certain extent. And North Richmond has been working very hard. Richard particularly has been working hard with the Neighbourhood Watch, improving the Neighbourhood Watch, improving our relationship with the police. Sadly, we lost one of our PCs recently, and we're hoping to have him replaced as soon as possible. And we have our own little hot spots, one being the pedestrian walkway from Sheendale Road into St. Mary's Grove, where there is drug dealing, and sometimes mothers are accosted as they're on their way to Marshgate to pick up their children. And that will happen there. And this past summer, we were able to have a police van there every day for a few weeks to just make sure that people realized that the ne'er-do-wells knew that we had our eye on the place, and and we will continue to do that. In terms of, you were saying, your tenacity and trying to find a place for the police, it was one of the things with North Sheen Station. One of the projects that I have asked the Southwest Trains to help with, and they're very enthusiastic about it, is to take the disused ticket hall at North Sheen Station, and we would take it over for our police in order for them to have a place to sit and meet with people. And I am hoping we will get that. We'll know sometime in March, but I spent a lot of time and got a lot of help from officers writing that so that we'd have some place to put our policemen rather than just one wandering aimlessly at various Starbucks in the area. But it has been very frustrating because it is just how it works. You push a crime from one area and we'll go into the next, but we are doing our very best, and we all work together to make sure that this is taken care of. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Just we'll allow people to settle down, but there's normally a right of reply, but since Katie's not here, has anybody got a comment or question on this specific question, not a general question, on this specific question before we move on? At some stage, I will get my glamorous assistant Gareth onto the street, but obviously not quite yet. Can I welcome Councillor Bill Newton-Dunn to the chair, to the table. Introduce myself. I'm Andrew. I'm the chair for the meeting.
I can read the thing in front of you. Yes.
Good. Fantastic. And
late, but thanks.
appreciate your presence and understand you've been here. The next question I'm going to ask from Janice Kendall. Is she in the audience? Yes. So Janice Kendall, Gareth, could you do it?
My name's Janice Kendall and I live in Selwyn Avenue. And as a resident and car owner, why do we pay all the parking charges yearly to park in Selwyn Avenue and find on the majority of cases there are no parking spaces available and we have to park miles and miles away from home? And this is obviously due to the local restaurants' clientele parking every day at 4:30 until 12 or later. And when they come out, the noise is unbelievable. It's like being in a nightclub. And residents are unable to park, and they find, again, they've got to park miles away from home, and it's getting worse on a daily basis. I've only put a suggestion here, is to put the parking times from 10 to 6:30, which will enable residents who work able to park nearer home is one solution, only one. And the rest actually is. We have no sign at the top of Selwyn Avenue. That was knocked down and removed months ago. And then we have these smelly bins owned by the various restaurants and placed at the top of Selwyn Avenue, which to my opinion, and only my opinion, is against health and safety, unhealthy and unsightly and terribly smelly in the summer. And that's mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Who would like to take this?
Well, I'm going to take it because you and I have worked on this bin thing for a while, haven't we? But I'll start with the parking. Yes, I mean it's not just Selwyn. It's a lot of different areas all over our ward and all over the borough actually. And whilst we need the businesses, we want the businesses, we don't want some of the problems that go with the businesses. So in terms of changing the hours of the CPZ, that's possible, but it wouldn't be just Selwyn. We would have to do a consultation for the entire CPZ and change it, and everyone would have to want to change it. And I think it's something like, is it a 50%? I think 50% of the people have to want it, the respondents have to want it in order to change it. So that's possible, we can do it, we can go and we can do the consultation, but there's no guarantee that that's going to change anything for Selwyn Avenue necessarily. In terms of getting signage up, yeah, we can get a new sign up, and we will do. So that's not. I believe the officers are working on it at the moment. Smelly bins. Oh my goodness. Have we I started working on this when I first became a councillor over a year ago. The officers and I walk past them quite regularly, and when they're not good, I will take people to task. And we do our best to make sure that they're well managed and that they're looked after and everything else, but ultimately they are on private land, and as the council we have no control over them as long as they are on private land. Over the years, all of these restaurants and places of business have developed the rear ends of their properties, so they can't leave their bins out and back, and even if they did, they would still have to move them to the street anyway, and so that's going to cause noise. We did some work on making sure at least the times of collection were not quite so antisocial. So we've worked on that, and hopefully they're still keeping to the correct times. Well, why haven't you told me?
Can you use the microphone? Sorry.
Thank you. They're still dirty. The refuse is still left on the street. The bins are often on the public.
Well, I
pavement.
thought you and I had a good enough relationship that you would tell me when this was happening.
It's happened so frequently, I cannot keep up the correspondence.
But the point is when we do have, if you were to tell us and we know these things, we can have it looked at and dealt with right away. The bulk of the stuff is food waste. We can't have bags of it out, because we all know what foxes do, and we would have a worse problem than we do at the moment. But what I can say is that if you let us know, we can have things looked at within 24 to 48 hours. And I mean, it's not.
Nancy, with the
Well, but can we just finish the answer?
Well, that is pretty much what I was going to say.
I was going to say, if we look at things in 24 hours, that's far too late. They're cleaned up in 24 hours, but the residue and the mess is left on the street. So that the pavements will be strewn with litter and food and liquid. It's really quite disgusting.
Janice, do you want to have because you asked the original questions, anything you want to say in addition, having heard Nancy?
Well, no, I agree with my neighbour here. I agree with my neighbour. The only other thing, we have an alleyway very close to those bins, and the fly tipping is unbelievable. Mattresses, prams, bikes, everything. I did report it to the police, but obviously since we haven't had our police locally.
And have you reported it to the local we have a fly tipping hotline, as it were. No, you haven't. Okay.
We report the fly tipping to the council.
Do you?
And yes, and the bins actually encourage fly tipping.
Peter, you want to say something? Yeah. No, sorry. Bill, sorry.
I'm sure Peter can answer better than me, but I'll jump in to catch up. As I understand it, our refuse is collected by, it's subcontracted, and a private contractor gets the contract and does the business. So if you complain, although it still happened, we can make quite a case against the contractor and say you're not going to get it next time, so jolly will improve. That's one thing. The other point I make is that, of course, everything in life is a payoff. We could have people on every street corner cleaning up everything every second, but it would cost you and me as taxpayers a fortune to have people clearing it up. So it's a balance between how often do we clear it up and how much tax do we pay. So it's tricky, but pile in the complaints and we'll make sure the contractor knows.
Well, I happen to know with this particular one that they're private contractors who are hired by the restaurants, and I think there's just one bin that's actually handled by the council, and the rest are handled by private contractors, and we do make these. You know, I would love to go down and sweep and scrub that as much as anyone else. And you were there when I talked to the manager of the ones, and they said they would clean the things. All I can say to you is, let me know when they don't, and I will go down and make the same case again and remind them of their undertaking to us to make sure that it's clean. But in the end analysis, it is on private property, and we have no legal ability to change that. They can use their private property how they wish. And I don't like it any better than you do, but there you go.
Okay, so we're in a position where it's going to have to be communicated to Nancy and the other councillors, and we'll have to take it from there. I'm now going to read out a question that was submitted in advance, but the person unfortunately couldn't be here. And so the question is, what is the council going to do about the lack of public conveniences in Richmond town? With the House of Fraser closing, the pressure will increase. This is a public health issue, as well as one of accessibility and discrimination for individual residents, for example, if disabled, in a wheelchair, elderly, or with children. Thank you. I guess that falls to Sab.
Yes, indeed. We have what's known as community toilet scheme, and there are various cafes, pubs, shops throughout the town, indeed across the borough, who are paid a small amount by the council, and people are able to use the facilities there. This is being reviewed at the moment, and I know that I had an email and an exchange actually with officers a couple of weeks ago, and they are seeking to get some more people, some more establishments actually involved in it, particularly in Richmond Town Centre. But also, I think you will find that a lot of the shops and businesses are very, very happy for you to use their toilets. The problem is much greater at night, actually, because there can be a reluctance, I know, particularly around some of the riverside area, to just allow people to go in and use their toilets because some of the people have had a lot too much to drink, and I know it does become quite a problem on the riverside. But the community toilet scheme is actually a good scheme. It's been running since I think about 2005, 2006, and it does provide, you know, toilets throughout the town. Where I think we do need better is better signage, and actually so that people actually know where they are, because I think that's the problem. They can perhaps look it up on, and we did actually try to explore this being done on an app with the Richmond card, but I think it is a question, and I flagged this up actually with the officer for the review, and how we can look at making sure people are much better aware of where the toilet facilities are, you know, not just in Richmond town, but elsewhere in the borough as well. It is important. We want older people, and it is often or people with children as well, mother with children, we want them to come and use our high streets, and if we want people to use our high streets, and you know, therefore they've got to be, you know, proper toilet facilities. So it is something, and it is something we continue to look at, and as I say, there is a review being carried out right at the moment.
Thank you, Pamela. Can you just order of magnitude, do we know roughly how many there of these in this toilet scheme there are in Richmond? Scores or?
No, I think probably in Richmond town there are probably about 10 or 15. I'm not sure. Do you know? Yes, Lottie, do you know how many?
Councillor Campanelli here. Hello, Councillor Campanelli from Kew. We've got a new app out called Access Able, which you can download, which is primarily about accessing, Councillor Michael will be able to tell you more about accessing buildings and places to visit, but it also does detail loo facilities. So that's worth downloading if you have the facility to download an app. And also, I know in our review of loos that we have also considered these pop-up pods that you can get, and also the foaming cleaning technique that can be used. So we are looking at it, but as Councillor Fleming has said, it's under review at the moment.
Thank you. had a comment, Bill?
Well, I understood, and I'm a bit out of touch, and the distinguished councillor who's just spoken knows more about this than I do. When we were on a committee together, she was the chair, I was the junior assistant, we wanted to look into this, and I understood that some cafes in the town, and God knows how many we've got, are actually paid a fee each year in return for providing the facility, but they're expected to show a nice sign so the public knows that they're taking money from us and they're providing facility. And I must say, I've never seen one of these signs. I don't know if anybody else has, but perhaps we should press for the signs to be displayed.
Okay, if it's on this question, can I just have, if it's adding anything, a comment from the lady in green, lady behind, and then quick fire, you three with a hand up, and then we'll stop.
Yes, hello. Yeah, the community.
Can you give your name, please?
My name is Deborah West. I live in East Sheen. I think the community toilet scheme is a good scheme, but I use the public libraries quite a lot, and what I've discovered is that the library on the green doesn't have a toilet for library users and other visitors to use. Now, given that the other libraries tend to have a toilet of some description on site in the centres, for example at East Sheen, or at the main library in Richmond, I would expect, that there would be that, because you have a wonderful disability ramp that leads into that library, so therefore it follows you would probably have a toilet too.
Thank you. Can you pass the microphone up? And
Can I just say that I thought that they were looking at installing putting a library into the library on the green. Certainly it was at one stage being looked at. It may have been that there may be problems because of course it's a listed building and there may have been problems, but I know they were actually looking at that, and of course there is the toilet in.
Okay. We perhaps can ask to find out what the situation is on that one. Yes.
My name's Indra Dillon. I live in Richmond Town Centre. W.H. Smith, as part of their extension about 20 odd years ago, there is a disabled toilet with the key system, but it was vandalised and it doesn't seem to be used. And also the scheme for using toilets, restaurants, cafes, etc., it needs to be updated because I don't think that always happens.
Thank you. Can we have one last question at the back, and then I'll ask if there are any final comments from the table.
Hello, Jane Harrison from Kew. Yes, I volunteer at the Museum of Richmond, which is over the top of the reference library, and there is a toilet provided there, but I went past it today while I was working there. Quite frankly, I wouldn't go in that toilet if you paid me. It smells most peculiar. I think you might contract cholera if you went in there. It's just, there's something terribly wrong with it. I don't know quite what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments or actions from the five councillors you want to add to that?
No, other than that, I think that these are all comments that can be fed into the review that's undergoing at the moment, that's being undergone at the moment. And I can also, Marks and Spencer is part of the scheme, and they actually provide good toilet facilities. But yeah, I think this is all interesting and good information for the review.
Okay. So we'll make sure that gets into the review. Thank you. Penultimate question, I think, of the written questions. Indra and Dylan. Thank you. Thank you, Gareth.
Hi, it's about the large food delivery organisations and their, I feel, lack of accountability and regulation, because we've had real problems, and I've contacted the councillors about it, and talking to other residents, it's about not being able easily to identify if they work for the food delivery companies, the lack of space, and the council, as far as I know, haven't contacted organisations such as Uber, Deliveroo, etc., because they have a large amount of money, and surely it would make sense for them to find somewhere for their drivers to be so they can have rest periods and breaks, because what's happening is they're using the motorcycle moped areas as their hub area and for having their meetings. It's basically like, and it stops other people using them. And are there enough motorcycle areas as well? And they illegally park every day. And there's some, unfortunately, not very nice characters, and they've caused a lot of antisocial behaviour for over a year. I just wondered why or if the council will contact these really large organisations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indra. No, that's lovely. Thank you, Indra. Who would like to?
Yes, I'll do it. Because
Pamela and then Bill.
Yeah. We have actually been into. Well, the police actually have been in touch with Deliveroo. With Deliveroo, I know, and we've also been, and I think you've been involved in the correspondence we've had with David Noakes, our community safety officer as well, and in fact our parking officers. Because there are occasions when they're parked at bays that the parking officers and civil enforcement officers can move them, ticket them. And I know there were a lot congregating around the RPLC offices, and of course in Victoria Place, but various places around the town. By Amanda's flower stalls, they've had a lot of problems as well. And the CEOs have actually tried to move them on, and in fact ticket them to tackle it. But I've also tried to be in touch with other, because the problem is one that more and more people want takeaway food. So therefore, this is the business for Deliveroos, and the local restaurants and cafes, need to have people fairly close by. So some of the other councils, one of them, I think it was Hillingdon, they tackled the problem by making a particular area available for them. And I have asked our parking officer to see if there's some particular area that could be, specific area that could be made, available for them, that's out of the way. I mean, I actually have suggested somewhere in Old Deer car park possibly. But they know better where this might be. I haven't had a response, but I think we do need to look at this. Westminster are actually looking at a licensing issue, and I think that's again something we're going to have to explore, because there's no doubt it's becoming an increasing problem around certainly around Richmond. I'm not sure it's as much of a problem around Easheen and around, say, Twickenham, but it is in Richmond. So it is something we have to look at, and we'll continue to work with it came up at the police liaison group as well. We'll continue to work with community safety officers, and the highways and parking officers to see what we can do, and the police, of course, as well.
Thank you. Bill, you wanted? Can we just have comments, and I'll come back to you. Yeah, I will come back to you, but Bill.
Just to say, I agree with Pam, and I agree with you. The other day, walking on the green past the old water fountain on the corner, there were 4 of these Deliveroo scooters together, and one poor warden trying to say to them, hey guys, you're not supposed to be able to move on, but 4 against 1, he was feeling rather oppressed, and I didn't really want to get into a fight on his side, though I would have done, but clearly it's not right, and when they've got a lot of them, we need to do something about it. Maybe increase the penalties, or escalating penalties if they keep doing it. I don't know, we need to look at that.
Indra, do you want to respond?
The thing about the parking enforcement officers, one actually said to them, oh, just don't come to this road for a couple of weeks and then return. They're still there on a daily basis, and because we've approached them, there's quite some of them are quite unsavoury characters, and it's more about they've spoilt it for the majority of Uber drivers, because we do need them around because of, you said how there's been changes. But I thought a facility that they could use indoors as well, because for their rest periods, because they're actually sleeping on their mopeds and sleeping in seating areas, and they even brought their own chairs. So,
Okay.
I think the councillor from Kew wants to make, sorry I've forgotten your name, but wants to make a quick comment. Can you keep it brief, please, so we can do...
Thank you, Councillor Campanale from Kew. Just on the idling of taxis and Uber drivers, we've had this problem outside the Royal Botanic Gardens, and at a meeting about that, we did discover that with Uber, you can actually request a zone where they're not allowed to stop.
you have to get in contact with Uber to do this, but you can actually, it's more difficult, ironically, with black cabs, but just to say that it is possible, but that doesn't help with the bikes and stuff, I appreciate.
Thank you. I think that's a really live issue. It sounds as though we are taking it. I'm just going to, without trivialising the issue at all, I'm going to give you the experience of my son who's just moved to San Francisco, and he showed me a picture of his pizza being delivered by an autonomous robot. So it may be a time-limited problem, but that isn't to trivialise it.
Sorry, one point. The other day I was lucky on at a briefing by NATO, and one of their big worries is these drones that are going to be delivering everything, because they said our problem is some of them may be from Iran carrying unpleasant weapons and chemicals and whatever, and our problem is how do we distinguish between a legitimate drone carrying a pizza and an Iranian drone. So it's a worry for the future.
Yes, and if it takes too long, it's another way. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now read out the last of the submitted questions from Katie Lang, who isn't here unless she's arrived in the last few moments. Okay, I've done this one last because I can imagine there may be some other comments about this one. Katie Lang said, inevitably a question about the flight path and the additional terminal at Heathrow. Can more be done around varying the flight path so that we get a bit of a break from it? The links between noise, sleep deprivation and well-being are well documented. Most people agree around 8 hours sleep rest is pretty desirable. Planes fly low and I believe have wheels down over Richmond. The noise is pretty intrusive. It goes on past 11 p.m. and begins again sometime around 5 a.m. Living in the borough, it's almost impossible not to have your sleep disturbed by the planes, and they're pretty noisy during the daytime as well. Can Heathrow do more to contain the noise and vary the routes to share the disruption? So I think obviously we don't have Heathrow here, though we did have Heathrow were here earlier on a consultation. I guess the question is for the local council, councillors to tell us what they're doing to represent the views.
I don't even know where to start. In some weird way, I think this is almost, we have Councillor Roberts here, who could probably speak to this better than anyone else, because I think, no, you're right, you could. The main thing is, Katie, and I think a lot of people in the room here know, we have been working on this for years and years and years, and Richmond Council has made an untold number of representations to Heathrow. We have consultations. We advise people on how to respond to the consultations. We are part of a legal cooperative now with all the other boroughs in the area. Millions have been spent trying to get a good night's sleep. And it will continue, and we will not stop. And we will just go on and on and on, because we're not going to roll over and lie dead while they try to increase the number of flights. They came up with an idea recently where a way of increasing flights so they can fly in and out simultaneously. We'll keep fighting. That's what we do, is we fight, and we'll keep fighting, and we won't stop. And I think am I speaking for all my colleagues here when we say that?
Well, absolutely, and we have, as we know, and it's disappointing that the council lost the judicial review against the third London, the third runway. But I mean, there's recently been a consultation. Some of you, I hope, will have responded to it. It finished on the 13th of September, and that's probably the last we'll see before they apply for planning before it goes forward for planning next year. But meanwhile, they are actually looking to increase the 480,000 flights actually, and have a sort of expansion in advance of a third runway by another sort of 25,000 a year. Actually, the person in this room who probably knows more about Heathrow than anything else and does more for work than anybody else is Peter Willett, who's sitting there, and the Richmond Heathrow group, and I mean, he has responded and does so much work. We work in partnership with him, with the council, and when we have our Heathrow Standing Committee, Peter, and then there's TAG in Teddington, we put forward, I mean, clearly from noise, air pollution. We all know that, Heathrow is in the wrong place. But the council you've only got to look at the council website actually to see how much we do. And I don't know, Peter, if you would like to just say anything very briefly, because you do.
Are we allowed to ask him? I didn't want to put him on the spot.
Well, if Peter could phrase it as a sort of supplementary answer, I'm sure we could allow it.
Well, just very briefly on the flight paths. If you live under the current northern one in Kew and the North Ward, when they get the third runway, there won't be a lot of change, except you may get one day with 16 hours of flights, and then the next day with none. So they're going to change the pattern, but overall the number of flights will be the same. If you live nearer the southern runway, I'm afraid we're going to lose, we have 8 hours respite, we're going to lose 4 hours of those. And there's going to be a lot of noise. And the second thing is that they're going to be curving in the flights over Richmond, because they've figured out that there's nobody living in Richmond Park. So they're going to make use of that, and we don't quite know where the joining point will be, but planes on the curvatures produce more noise, and so we've got a lot to challenge. And on the night flights, just finally, we are, certainly Richmond Heathrow campaign, we are challenging. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Department of Transport. Heathrow are wanting 6.5 hours a ban, agreeing to 6.5 hours ban from midnight till 5:30. We're saying if it's got to be 6.5, then it should be from 11:30 till 11 till 6. That's right, 11:30 till 6, because there shouldn't be any flights anyway between 11 and 11:30. But we're aiming for still 8 hours respite, as much as we can.
Thank you. Now, I'm getting across the audience general nods and looks of, dare I, if I could interpret them, of anger and all the rest of it. Has anybody, apart from the obvious, which has already been said, is there anyone got anything particular they want to ask the councillors about the council's response, or what the council are doing here? This is obviously a big issue, but it's an issue that is well rehearsed, I think. So.
Sorry, having attended numerous consultations and accumulated vast files full of stuff about Heathrow, one of the things that annoyed me more than anything else about the most recent consultation is the fact that they are not actually going to consult on the flight paths until 2022.
Peter, you had a comment.
Yes, just that where I am at the bottom of Queen's Road there, I must admit I find that the runway alternation a godsend. I think we've got to keep hold of that. I know it's been suggested that it is dispensed with, at least I read that as a threat. I think we've got to keep on at that and develop it if we can, because I think it is a godsend that you don't have the flights overhead all the time. And I think that William is doing sterling work on night flights. They start at about 4:45 where we are sometimes, although we don't get them every morning because of runway alternation. But I wake up, even though I've lived there 20 years, I tend to wake up more often than not. And we need to do what we can to protect our nighttime silence and to maintain the runway alternation.
Richard, you had a comment.
Thank you. Yes, just on that specific question about what the council is doing and the judicial review that was mentioned earlier by Councillor Fleming. What the council is doing about that is we're appealing that decision along with the other councils involved. So we're appealing it on the basis of noise, which has been mentioned here, and also the impact on habitat. So there is still hope yet. Maybe we can get the courts to help us deal with this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this an additional point? Okay.
Hello, it's Elizabeth Clegg. I'm speaking on behalf of Annick Robson, who is ill. And I'm reading her question. What is Richmond Council going to do should the new Conservative mayoral candidate, I believe she means London Mayor, if elected, she believes that they wish to go ahead with the third runway. This is news to me. I don't know this, but this is the question that I've been asked to ask.
So, so can I interpret the question? So I'm trying to think of the local issue. The issue is, what will the local council do if the Conservative mayoral candidate wins? And you're saying, and I don't know this, you're saying that her policy is to support the extra runway. Man, I do apologise. I misheard that.
I'm not. No, I think I understand now. No, I mean the official Conservative candidate does not support the third runway, as far as I'm aware. But I think what she's talking about is that somebody called Rory Stewart, who's a member of Parliament for Penrith and Bord. I think anyway, he is now. Well, no, he's still a member of Parliament for. And he is standing as an independent candidate, and he hasn't said anything about the third runway, but the point is he did support it when it was voted on in Parliament, so I think that must be what she...
But I think the main thing though is whatever they do is irrelevant. Richmond will continue to fight against this development. So I think she should take comfort.
And I think I can gather from the table that it's apolitical, that is across the boundary, and everybody's agreed in that. Good, thank you. That brings to the end the pre-submitted questions. We now have 40 minutes for questions from the floor. And suggestions, yes, thank you very much. Suggestions and comments from the floor, both things that you want the council to do and ideas that you might have. There will also be time at the end to talk a little bit about the ward plans. So can you put your hands up, and can I ask you, there's a gentleman there, Gareth, with the white hair. Can I ask you if you are willing to give your name and then your question?
Paul Gruderowski, St George's Road. Not the Twickenham one, the Richmond one. Just two observations, follow up to two things. First of all, when the bin men have been, the amount they've left is quite ridiculous. They do fill the bin, the thing from the bins, but then they leave a whole trail of muck behind them. And I think the people, the firms should be told about this and something done about it. And the other short thing is, when I went and asked for the loo map, I was told the loo map doesn't exist anymore. But for some people, a map is very useful. Apps are fine, but very useful if that were printed again and brought up to date. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any particular comments? Some of those would have been covered previously or added on, but particular comments?
Well, in terms of the bin men leaving things, I hear what you're saying. It happens a lot. And sometimes you'll talk to some streets and they love their crew and who are always tidy, and other people don't love their crew. If you have difficulties, you let us know and we go get your street swept. And you can look online to see this is the other thing, you can always look online as well to see when your street is due to be swept. So you can always know that as well. So.
Thank you.
Sorry, may I just actually jump in on that as well? Because the recycling and refuse crews also carry brooms, and they are supposed to clean up after them. Well, they do, and in fact I have followed one round that actually was, but I suspect it was when I was the cabinet member, and I suspect they might have known that I was following them round. But it is important, if you let your councillor know, if once the teams are told, and it does vary with the teams, as Nancy quite rightly says, some of them are great and the teams can change, so it really is important to report it, because it shouldn't be. Yeah.
So I think the message is, if people don't know about it, they can't do anything about it, so let them know, I think is a common message. Thank you. There's a question there from this gentleman, and then we will go to this lady here.
Thank you. My name is Chris Smith. I would like to know if there's been any progress on a proposal that was put to the council by myself and Friends of the Green to make Old Palace Terrace one way. It's a very short stretch of road on the corner of the Green, but it is a very, very dangerous corner. Making it one way would eliminate the corner. What happens at the moment, there are literally hundreds of vehicles every day, including heavy goods vehicles on sat-navs that go wrong, on council refuse collections regularly across the footpath. It's such a tight corner, they can't not avoid it. And it's been proposed that Friends of the Green will actually pay for it. It's a very simple operation. Doesn't seem to have any downsides and a lot of benefits.
Thank you. Peter, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I would like to say something. Thanks very much for bringing it up, Chris. I met you on site with Vivian from Friends of Richmond Green, and as a result of that meeting, I drew it all out and wrote it all up, and I put it into officers who then started the process of examining it and analysing it, etc. And from time to time I followed up on where we are with it, and just last week I got told that it is in with a group of similar proposals for various parts of the borough, which are being set up for analysis using a piece of software which is being lent to us, or the time is being lent to us by Transport for London. And this piece of software is meant to be the latest and will do all the analysis that officers want. Now, I read two things into that. I read one, fine, yes, it's on a pathway, but I also read that it might be a reason for the thing being delayed rather longer than we would wish locally for that to happen. So it's a matter of expediting it, which I fully intend to do, and thank you for bringing it up, because it will, I hope, raise the profile of that particular scheme. I think it is a valuable one. I think there's a safety element there which has long been neglected, and with sat-navs sending these very large vehicles down very small roads, it probably is a matter of time before somebody gets hurt, I know, or you lose your front room, because I know they come quite close to your cottage there. It came up at the town centre planning group a couple of months ago, so it's on the agenda there, and will be part of the items that are being looked at to improve the centre of Richmond. So I hope between us we can get it done. Thank you.
I was lobbied by John Lee, who lives down Friars Lane, or just up there, saying these enormous trucks try to turn down Friars Lane. So it's part of the same little area in this lovely area. And I asked the council, forgetting to consult Peter, but I should have done, but the council officer said, well, we haven't got the money to do a proper survey and consultation, but if you could persuade the local people living there to get up a petition and demonstrate that public opinion in that little neck of the woods is very strongly for doing exactly what you suggested, or cutting out a lot of the trucks, whatever, then we would take a lot of notice, and it would save us all the elaborate costs of doing an expensive public survey. So if you, maybe you're involved in one already, but a voluntary petition can carry a lot of weight.
Well, we did council, it's small in numbers because it's very difficult with a lot of apartments getting anyone in numbers to sign a petition. But in terms of cost, the Friends of the Green, and I must say Councillor Buckwell's been very understanding about this problem. He's been to see it. And Friends of the Green, who agree, will foot the bill. There is no cost involved to the council. And anyway, it's minimal. It really is a question of a no entry sign, full stop. All you're doing is redirecting traffic around a very small area. The problem is, I won't go on too long about it, the heavy goods that come around there are, not infrequent. 6 at least every Tuesday. Some going down to the outlets on the river. They are duplicated. One goes down to collect from that pub, the other one follows it down and goes to that pub. The pubs are 20 metres apart. I mean, it's ludicrous. The council 2-3 weeks ago repaired, which they do every so often, the corner where they regularly cross. 3 days later, once the cement had dried, they removed the cone to protect it. The council's own vehicles are breaking it up again. It's ludicrous.
Okay, Pete, it sounds like this is something that you're taking forward.
Yes.
And I'm going to make sure. Thank you very much. Can we have this lady here, I think with her own question this time?
No, I have another one for my friend and one for myself.
Okay, can we have yours first?
Okay. Well, mine is actually on behalf of a group, and Councillor Fleming and Councillor Buckwell are aware of this and have worked very closely with us, and I would like to thank them, in fact, for all the support they've given us over the last year. But it's about street lighting. We are aware that the council is about to roll out the swap to LED across the borough, and we welcome the reduction in energy and all the ecological benefits of LED. What we question, and we are now aware that this has also been questioned in Kew, is the choice of high Kelvin light, which means, to unpack that, it's a bright, cold, hard light. The head of lighting said it was just like the moon, but the moon is somewhat further away from my house, and anybody's house, than a street light. There are lower Kelvin solutions available, not obviously for every road, but in residential roads where there is no particular problem, no need for bright, cold, blue lighting, which I'm also told, but I'm not an expert on this, could have health negative connotations. You probably know better than I on that one. Why the council seems to have chosen, and I would like confirmation on this, the 4,000 high Kelvin thing. Then, as a rider to that question, I understand, but I have no confirmation of this, that if residents and roads are prepared to pay extra or outside their council tax to pay privately, however you care to phrase it, that they are given a choice of different lighting. Now, if this is the case, and I have no confirmation of this, save what I have heard from residents in Kew, if this is the case, it seems to me iniquitous.
Thank you. And you said that was on behalf of a group. What was the group?
This is residents of Hobart Place.
Thank you very much. So first of all, councillors on the table before we return to members of the audience. Any comments?
Well, I will actually, Councillor Campanelli, because you're from Kew and you may be able to answer part of that. But on the point about being given a choice, the only, if you are prepared to pay, the only thing that I know about is that if you want to have heritage lights, as we actually have done in the Albert, you can pay. You can actually pay for that. But I don't know about it as far as changing. Do you want to?
I know a little something more about that. Yes, you can choose to have heritage lighting if the council has designated you as a conservation area and a place that has. If you don't, if you're a bunch of 1930 semis, then you will get the standard light. I'm not aware of any difference in terms of the LED, and that's where I'll go and refer to Councillor Campanelli. But can I just say, the reason why I'm concerned about your use of the word iniquitous, because the difference is a regular lamppost and light costs the council £250. If you were to go ahead and get a heritage light, that's $850-ish per. I don't know why, and then the council doesn't ask you to pay the complete difference between those two. They ask you to pay 50% of the difference between those two if you want to have the heritage lighting. And it has to be the majority of the people in the area would have to agree to do it, and then they would be asked to pay that 50% of the difference between the 250 and the 850. And I think you could probably see the argument about why I and my 1930 semi should underwrite someone else having a heritage street light. Why you might say that. So I'm worried about the word iniquitous.
So, but just to be clear, we think the heritage lights, they have the same LED, it's a different shape.
Yeah, and that.
Oh yes, it's
But I was given to understand, and Councillor Campanelli can tell you, that you can make changes to that if it is heritage lighting. Did I get the wrong end of the stick on that one?
So as you
Yes.
Don't tap it.
Yes, don't tap it.
So, as you said, this question has come up in queue already, the two questions. On heritage lights, as Councillor Baldwin says, you have to live in a conservation area to qualify, if you like. And even then, you must have over 50% of your road in full agreement, and every household in the road has to commit to paying. So we did have one road in queue that we thought were going to go for it, but it hasn't come to fruition because the chances of actually getting everybody in your road, and Councillor Baldwin's point is quite valid, why should one road pay for another fancier road to have pretty lights? So that's the reason it isn't offered verbatim is because the take-up is not likely. And on the LED lighting, again, in fact, the same road in Kew, I think I had 4 different letters from 4 different households in the same road suggesting that they wanted a different LED wattage outside their own property. So we, as the officers had to point out, that we have to have a standard lighting level across the borough. We can't have, outside 94 this wattage and outside 96 another wattage. It just simply isn't viable, and it's to do with the lighting contract that we have inherited, I think, from Wandsworth. It's been rolled over to our borough, so that's another element to the LED lighting.
So just for clarification, because I think the LED lights in the heritage and in the other ones, the conventional ones, standard ones, is the same and is not adjustable. Is that correct?
I can't clarify between the heritage and I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that you have to have a blanket wattage. You can't have one road with one or one house with one. It's just simply not viable. And the reason we're implementing LED is, of course, for environmental benefit across the borough.
Okay. Do you want to come back? Actually, do you want to ask that gentleman on the way down, just because it's on the way past?
It's a different topic. Is
in that
okay?
case, no. Can we finish this topic? Sorry, I thought you were jumping in now. I do apologise.
I should apologise. Sorry. No, with regard to heritage, that's now been clarified because I haven't understood that it was only an aesthetic. I say only, and I don't think only aesthetic should ever go in the same sentence, because I think that impacts on everybody's well-being. However, I would question that you've just inherited. I mean, I do think that the council should look, not tonight, but going into the future, at why you have accepted the inheritance of this harsh, bright, white light that has been chosen by Wandsworth and lots of councils, not only in this country but around the world, and that I personally, and I know that my neighbours also believe, is not as restful to us, especially when the lights are very, very close, as they are in our cases, to our houses, which are tightly packed together with lampposts very close to windows, and also to wildlife, which is another big issue. I just think that as a society we are making a mistake.
Okay. Well, I happen to have been on the scrutiny committee that went to when we looked at that contract and looked at LED lighting, and I remember that I particularly, and you can check this out, I asked about the wildlife and questioned whether there were any health impacts and if there are impacts on the birds, and we were assured by the experts there that there wasn't. And as you can imagine, we can only if that's the case, if that's the advice we're given, obviously that's the thing. It's funny you should say that you hate them, because the people on my street love the new lights. They love the color. They love everything about them. So I think, you know, sometimes it can also be a question of taste. But I did follow up on the wildlife, because I was very concerned about that too, and I was assured that there was no impact on it.
Richard. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, just to give one positive for these lights, what we found in North Richmond is that we're pretty sure it's helped to prevent crime. There were a couple of streets where there had been a lot of thefts from cars. Through a combination of an increased police presence and the introduction of these lights, that went away. The police are now gone, the lights are still there, but the crime hasn't returned. And so we feel that's been a positive, and the residents there feel that's a positive, and they think the lights have had an impact in that sense.
Thank you. Can we return to our gentleman there now? Is this connected? Okay, yes, please. Can you wait for the microphone, please?
In Hobart Place, we have a mixture of both types of lighting, and I do notice when comparing the two, and it's easy to compare the two, that the LED lights outside the sphere of the light, they throw out very dark shadows, and which I think would probably sometimes make it difficult to see the curves and this sort of thing. And I have had quite a good look at this, and we do have our old lighting on one side of the road and the LED in another part of the estate, so we can compare it quite easily.
Thank you. Can we ask the gentleman over there? And can I just see some hands for other people who've got questions? Some at the back next, and then down to here. Okay, lovely. Thank you, sir.
Chairman, can I first of all apologise? I thought the discussion had been concluded. I didn't mean to leap in. My name is Michael Fulton. I live in Friar Star Road, Richmond Hill. I enjoy living in Richmond very much. There's one thing that really bugs me. I don't know if other people share this. If you're standing, it's the car parking in a particular part of Richmond. If you're standing outside Waitrose, and I'm sure most of you know where I'm talking about, there's a bus stop right outside Waitrose. And the buses then have to go through a kind of lottery because there's car parking both sides. Do you know what I mean? It's Lichfield Terrace, Sheen Road. And often the buses have to wait, and really the bus drivers kind of police it themselves, but they shouldn't have to, because you're always waiting for cars, often very inexpertly driven to park in, to park out. And in a way you're giving precedence to private drivers when really actually, I'm sure we agree, public transport should really have a kind of precedence. And I wonder whether you agree that maybe we should think about, say, just having car parking one side of the road and not the other. Just a thought, see what you all think. Thank you.
I guess this is south.
Well, I think everybody in the room has suffered from exactly that. It's extremely annoying and frustrating, and stupid drivers reversing and changing their minds. I think it's a terrifically good idea. I don't know if it's possible, but I would vote for it.
So how do people take that forward if we think it's a good idea? What's their route to put that idea forward?
I guess we would together, if we all agree, tell the councillor who's in charge of transport and parking that he can get a very strong message from us that he should change it.
Well, I also think it's part of the town centre consultation.
Well, I think it would need, I mean, you'd also need to talk to the businesses along there, because parking is important to those businesses, and quite a number of them are struggling actually at the moment. I actually know that. So I would say one would also want to talk to the Business Improvement District and to the businesses along there to see how it would actually impact on there, because the parking is important to them there, I know. But there might be some adjustments that could be made. So it's certainly something to be, to be considered.
Thank you. Is it about this issue? Yes.
Paradise Road car park is very much underused, and it's just nearby. So isn't there some way that could be used as an alternative for the businesses. I don't know. Just make that as a suggestion.
Thank you. Any other comments on this
Andrew,
one?
can just going on what Pam said, it may be that parking places are important to the businesses, but my dream is if we had a pedestrian-only centre of Richmond. I know it's completely impossible because of the bus routes and so on, but maybe we should have a study done to say, are these parking places filled with cars adding to the prosperity of that street, or actually it would be better to have a pedestrian-only street. I leave aside the question of what the buses would do, I realise, but I wonder, perhaps we should ask for a study on that.
Can I talk particularly to what you were just saying, Peter, because you were saying the Paradise Road car park is underused, and it is. And Whole Foods has a scheme whereby if you spend £25, you get free parking up to a certain amount at Paradise Road. And I think if you're jolly nice to them, they'll even deliver the stuff up there to you, for you. And I think maybe part of that is to have conversations with some of the other places, maybe like these other businesses that are right there, what's that, Fired Earth and those kinds of places, to say, look, if people spend, especially a place like Fired Earth where people go and they stay for a while because they're choosing tiles and whatever, to, you know, if you spend a certain amount with us, you get X amount of time free parking. So I think we have to start maybe getting some of the local businesses to think along those lines and making people more aware that there are alternatives to the parking. Yeah.
So what's the form? You were talking about the town centre plan. Does it fall underneath that town centre plan?
Well,
I don't.
Yeah.
Peter.
Well, it actually does, because parking is one of the aspects that's being looked at. So it would usefully slot into there.
Okay.
And if it does so, then it would be looked at regularly in terms of how's the proposal being developed, rather than just put it in as a one shot and then it gets picked up and maybe not. It needs something that looks at it regularly, and that group would do so.
Okay, so we can try and slot into that. Thank you. Question at the back row, I believe.
Hello, I'm Tom Absalom. I live in Warren Avenue, North Richmond. The councillors from South Richmond talked at the beginning of the consultation with running traffic around Berwyn Avenue. On the other side of the road, we have a very similar situation where traffic from the Upper Richmond Road dips down onto Deanhurst along Tangier and then bottlenecks up Warren Avenue. I live at the bottom of Warren Avenue, quite close to Tangier Park, and most Friday afternoons at around 4:30 the traffic is backed up almost to Tangier Park, all sitting there with engines idling, pumping out noxious gases. Is there a consultation for North Richmond, and can you tell me what the sanctions can be?
Thank you. Basically, what we're doing as councillors in North Richmond is we've started an informal survey. We put these street letters through residents.
You would have had one.
You'll have one, yeah. And for residents, letterboxes on Warren Avenue, Burdenshot, Deanhurst and so on. And we started knocking on doors and receiving emails from residents about the different options that residents themselves have suggested, to see what level of interest there is amongst yourselves about these different ideas, which include making Deanhurst one way, making Warren Avenue one way. And another idea was to put a blockage down the middle of Tangier Road. All of these ideas basically just to deter rat runners. And other people, as we've been going around, have been coming up with extra suggestions. So we started knocking on doors yesterday. We're going to knock on doors again on Saturday. And as I say, we're receiving emails as well. And at the end of that, we're going to get an idea of where, opinion is, because there has been a petition going around prior to this, looking for the one-way options on Deanhurst and Warren. It's got about 60 or so signatures but it's not quite enough to trigger a formal consultation, which is why we thought we drew this informal one to kind of help generate discussion, to see if there was more interest than was shown by the petition. So we should know by, say, the end of next week, because we're given a deadline of the 19th of October, really where opinion is on your streets. Because you're absolutely right, cars are coming down too fast in Deanhurst, and then they're queuing on your road, idling engines, pollution, all the rest of it. It's not good. We don't want that. So it's a question of how to deal with it. Just to say that we're also looking at whether or not things can be done on the Upper Richmond Road itself to help alleviate the problem. For example, there's I think it's officially described as an undesignated pedestrian crossing point. Anyway, basically there's a couple of bollards at the bottom of Berwyn Road on the Upper Richmond Road, and it seems that what's happening is that's creating a blockage. Cars are actually going onto the wrong side of the road to kind of leapfrog up towards Clifford Avenue Junction. People have even seen buses doing this. So it's dangerous apart from anything else. So it may be that by removing that, it might help to ease the flow of traffic. We've been looking into the rephasing of the lights to Clifford Avenue. The trouble there is that that is a TfL junction, and I think, to be honest with you, they're going to pretty much operate that according to their own interests. And since the closure of Hammersmith Bridge, they've really had to focus on moving traffic on their roads faster and over other bridges. So it's a bit of a complicated situation, but hopefully by the end of next week we'll get a better idea anyway of what residents want on your road and the neighbouring roads, and see where they can take us. We're also hoping that the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which will be introduced in your area early next year, might have an impact, because what the police and the council believe, and this is based on evidence, is that if you lower the speed limit, it actually reduces the speed that speeding drivers go at. It's slightly strange, bizarre. It's a psychological thing, I guess. But so if you lower it from 30 miles to 20 miles, then the rat runners coming down Deanhurst won't go quite as fast. That's the hope. That is based on other evidence, and one of the reasons why 20 miles an hour has been introduced. So, there are these various things that we've got to bring into the equation. But as I say, at the end of next week, we should get a better idea of what's going on, and then we'll report back to you and the other residents to give you an update. Thank you.
Can I just take on the bit about idling, because that's a problem, and we know it is. Our parking enforcement people are now empowered to request that people turn off their engines. I'm happy to undertake to see whether or not we can have enforcement people down at particular times and ask them to do this. How it works at the moment is because, if we ask them to turn off their engines, if they don't turn them off, then they can be given a ticket, but if they turn them off, then they don't. So let me see if we can get some enforcement down to help you. If you wouldn't mind emailing me and tell me when you think the
4:30 on Friday.
Only 4:30 on Friday. Bank holidays, 4:30 on Friday. Okay. Let me see what we can find out about that, and see if we can have enforcement officers sent to you. Because I have a feeling rat runners tend to be the same people all the time, and if they start getting ticketed, that might help.
You happy with that response? Thank you very much. We have a question down here. This might be the last question. Is there any more questions that anybody is burning? Here we have. Okay, yes, sorry, you've got your second one. Keeping it on things, sir.
Hi, my name is Raphael. I live on Church Walk, just not too far next to where La Buvette used to be, one of the cottages. My question is less kind of physical about parking and bins, it's more social. So as a Mexican-American, openly gay person who moved to Richmond about 3 years ago, I was wondering if the council could share any kind of plans, strategies, thoughts on kind of engaging with minority populations in Richmond to make them feel more welcome. In particular, I guess I'm thinking about the Richmond Arms, which is the last LGBT venue in the borough, that closed down about 3 years ago. Any kind of plans in that space to make people feel more included?
Thank you. Who'd like to talk?
Well, I'll say, I've lived in different places, but I have to say I think Richmond is the most sociable place I've ever lived in. There are innumerable societies covering just about every possible interest we have, and I'm sure, not necessarily I, but somebody can point you to a society, or you can found one yourself. This is a very intelligent area, and I'm sure we can find something for you to do.
Can I just say, as the American mayor of this borough, we do work hard on inclusiveness and diversity. I have a gay son, and can I think off the top of my head any bar that you can go to? And right now I can't. I'll think about it. But do we work hard on having activities and things like that? Yes, but we also depend on the community to help itself. I mean, if you're wanting to get together with some Mexicans and talk to, I know a few families, talk to me later, we can get together. But the point is sometimes it has to come from the community and ask us so that we can help, rather than I'll say, oh look, I just happened to think about this thing here, maybe there's somebody to take up. So I think if you think of it the other way, we're very community oriented. This is why we're having these conversations, is because we want to know what the community thinks. So, yeah.
So I think if you talk to Councillor Nancy afterwards, I'll also say that I think that, take Chair's prerogative, it's half a year away, but things like the Richmond May Fair is a fantastic opportunity that happens in this place, where all of the different groups come out, and it would be a chance to take part in that, if I can suggest. This lady here, and then a lady at the back, can you make your questions really snappy? And I'll ask the responses to be snappy so we can talk about...
Hello, again on behalf of Mrs. Robson, and a familiar question from her, but an important one, with regard to the Council's tree conservation and replanting strategy. Mrs. Robson is concerned that in particular silver birches, street trees seem to be suffering and dying around the borough. We have one in Hobart Place, there's some in Marchmont Road, and I have noticed some on the A316 roundabouts that have died. It goes to pollution, obviously, and other things, but in an era of being huge concern about climate, what is the borough's policy on conservation and planting even more? We've got a lot, but we want even more.
And planting more trees. And in fact, at the Environment Committee on Monday, we have a paper coming to us to approve the planting of more trees. I can't really comment on the sick trees at the moment, but certainly. And actually, I'm glad you made it. But yeah, more trees. We want to plant more trees.
Thank you.
May I just add something to that? Just so you know, we do have a dedicated arborist. So if you're concerned about a particular tree, let any of the councillors know, and they can go out and be looked at. And if they need to be, so for example, in our ward, we had some sick trees that were taken down and they were replaced.
Question up there, and this will be the last question before we talk about ward budgets.
Right, there are just two things which sort of relate to each other. One is I'd like to congratulate all of you on improving the recycling figures. I'd like to know whether the borough figure has now gone up from 44%. And the second thing, which is really the question, what are we going to do when we lose the dump, when it's going to be the wrong side of the increased congestion zone in 2021, I think? The dump will be and Kew and East Sheen also will be split by the increase. Thing is, the dump is a wonderful amenity, and I hope the council's going to do something that will be available for all of us, whichever side of the increased congestion zone we end up living. Thank you.
So a question there about the dump, Peter?
Well, I think we can.
Well, it is a great facility. I agree, and we want to keep it. But I understand the problem when we're split by the ULEZ. and it is something that we're going to have to consider as a absolutely. And we want to encourage people to recycle more and more, and get the numbers up. And the flat recycling actually will help as well. And in particular, food recycling. I think we really want to encourage more people to recycle their food. So, yeah, and we do need to look. The point about the dump is an important one.
So I think the question is, has it increased over 44% for the thing?
It is I think it is. I think it's sitting around 44%. I thought. I think it's we've done the numbers. I think it is sitting at. I think it is. It is round about. It's still one of the highest. It's still one of the highest in London.
If I can take just
Richard,
Thank you, yeah.
and then Peter.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're in the top 6 of London boroughs for recycling, and yes, it would have gone up because, as I mentioned at the beginning, an extra 500 flats in the 2 wards are now taking on more recycling than have been previously. I can't give you an exact figure, but I'm sure it would have gone up. Just to add that on that point, the plan now for North Richmond is to extend recycling to 4 more locations, again blocks of flats, which have been the main problem area in the borough. They've been a very low rate of recycling. Parison Close, Owen Court, Alders Court, all on the Lower Richmond Road. Also Blenheim Court and Wilmslow on Stanmore Road, and in South Richmond, Queen's Court. So that'll be about a couple of hundred extra flats. Those are targeted, and we're getting residents telling us at other places that they would like to have their recycling expanded too. It does need the management of these estates, though, to agree to it. This is one of the stumbling blocks, and it does slow things down. But yes, we are making progress. We'd like to make faster progress, but progress is being made.
Yes, if I just can come in on the ULEZ, as you rightly pointed out in October 2021, if you don't have a vehicle that meets those environmental standards, it will cost you to go across the line, which is the South Circular Road, and use the Town Mead Recycling Centre. I haven't heard officially that anything's being done about it from the council point of view, but it certainly needs to be done. When it was proposed, and the mayor wanted to use the North-South Circular and South Circular roads as his boundary, we campaigned vigorously through London councils to not to do that, to either go the whole hog or not at all, because it split our borough, and it split just about every borough in a ring around. And the way he's done it is incongruous. The A12, for example, goes all the way into the centre of London, so like a spike right into the ULEZ area, and isn't covered by ULEZ. The boundary is on the inside of the North and South Circular roads, so the roads themselves aren't part of it. So anybody wanting to go from A to B who might normally have cut across will now struggle all the way around the South Circular Road, which can't cope with the volume of traffic that it's got at the moment. There are some big problems coming up, and we certainly need to address them and continue to do so. And one of them is, how can we get access for residents to Town Mead Road Recycling Centre?
And the crematorium.
And a comment there, please.
Just quickly on the ULEZ, obviously the Town Mead dumps is in my ward in Kew, and it's not just people travelling to take their refuse to the tip, it is also our main GP surgery in Kew is moving to the wrong side of the line, and I'm concerned about how elderly people are going to get to the GP surgery without having to pay 15 quid or whatever it is if they happen to have an old vehicle and they may not want to update it if they're elderly, for example. So it was one of the first things I wrote in to TfL about, and I've not had a favourable response so far. It's basically, it's going to be our TfL red routes, you know, tough. But I gather that Councillor Eamon is still on it and is still suggesting that it be moved, but I'm not holding out too much hope.
Good. Thank you very much. Any last comments on that one? Okay, thank you everyone. It is almost exactly 8:45, so we're doing well on time. The last item, but I think this is an item that might happen in discussion afterwards, unless somebody on the table is keen to say that, is to think about the ward budgets and how the money that's in the ward budgets can be spent. I know that there's an exhibition outside with opportunities for people to make comments on the ward budgets. I'm going to give everyone around here an opportunity to say anything about that they want, but maybe what I would do is encourage people to gather around those signs and talk together about it and come up with some good ideas together about what you want to do. So anything anybody want to say on this table before we break up?
I want to hear what people want.
Bill.
Well, just running up, I think somebody should say thank you to you for chairing so ably. There you go. Oh.